So I've done a couple of videos on weird fan wiki content at this point. With that in mind, a friend of mine recommended to me a certain bitter discussion that happened on a talk page on Wikipedia. Yeah, the weird stuff on the fan wikis is one thing. On Wikipedia itself, oh lord. Wikipedia can definitely be a disaster in its own right. Once you look at something that's even slightly obscure, it doesn't take long to stumble upon a list of cheat codes for an SNES Godzilla fighting game. So anyway, the friend I mentioned found out about this page from Twitch streamer Video Chess, who did a dramatic reading of it on a certain stream.
Don't flatter yourself, petty non-academic. I've seen you cite the Mushroom Kingdom. That site is many things, but I assure you that a reliable source isn't one of them.
This absolute masterpiece, this magnum opus, this certificate of mastery of the written word is from the talk page for Bowser, the Koopa King. And like, even if you just look at the archive for the Bowser talk page, it's a lot. Like, the first thing is Bowser Voldemort. There's like a debate about whether Mario and Baby Mario are the same character or not. In Super Mario World 2, we really do learn that he first encountered Mario as a baby. Nonsense! Mario is a plumber from Brooklyn who had been working in the sewers prior to actually being orientated with the Mushroom and Koopa Kingdoms. Should his nickname be Bow or Zer? How about Bows or Coop? I've never heard any of these nicknames. How did this rumor start that Bowser was in love with Peach? How do people know? Peach hates Bowser so much. She does not love him or his 7 children, the Koopalings. Bowser doesn't act much of a king. He behaves like a demon, and Mario acts like a much nicer king than him. Well, Mario isn't a king now, is he? There is this concentrated, distilled aggression on this talk page. I haven't seen Bowser ever referred to as Bowser Koopa in official materials. Can anybody provide an example? I doubt that there is any reference. However, that said, I know that it must be either Bowser Koopa or Koopa Bowser. And the first makes more sense. Okay, just gonna throw in here. So, when I was a kid, I was pretty into the Mario games. And some of my earliest forays into the internet were looking at Mario-related things. I remember being like very young and seeing a fan-made Yu-Gi-Oh card of like Giga Bowser, and I had just no conception that people could just make those up. So I was like, wait, Yu-Gi-Oh did a collab? Anyway, what I'm getting at here is a lot of this stuff is uncomfortably familiar. Like, I remember even in the limited exposure that I had back then, there were like disagreements about a lot of things. I was aware of the general internet zeitgeist surrounding the Mario franchise. This is at a time when the Mario series was much less defined than it is now. Things like rumor and speculation had more weight. The content of the old like Mario cartoons was considered to be like canon. So yeah, Mario and Luigi are plumbers from Brooklyn, and Bowser's full name is Bowser Koopa. What? Anthropomorphic fan art. Is it just me, or does this not belong in the art tile? It totally belongs in the article. Bowser fan art, especially if the Wikipedia isn't simply a canonical Nintendo publication, nor an official press release. It's neutral. This is a natural consequence of fans. Many who have Bowser is middle-aged, muscular. Some of it's pretty expressing their diverse appreciation for a favorite character. So do you want the sources? Gilgamesh. The fact that people want to fuck Bowser is literally just the most important thing. Like, I think they should just delete the main body of the article and write, there are people on the internet that want to fuck Bowser. That's literally the only important thing you can say about Bow or Zer. Problem with Sephiroth comparison? No, but like, talk to me about the similarities between Bowser and Jecht. I thought Bowser's name was King Morton Bowser Koopa Sr.? Where am I? Where am I? Someone save me. Like, get me out of here. Like, please lower a silk thread into this hell so I can climb out of it. God, I'm here for like one specific topic of discussion, but it's just turning out that like every one of them is a complete banger. Oh lord. I see Claudia with a W, and it awakens something from the farthest reaches. Does anyone else remember this? That like, it was just kind of agreed upon in the fandom that Bowser had a wife named Claudia and she was the mother of Bowser Jr. and all the Koopalings? This is just like an absolutely beautiful string of people making the most shallow claims and using whatever bullshit they feel like to back them up. It's heavily implied that Super Mario Bros. 3's Dark Land is the Koopa Kingdom. The game is running at like a resolution of 6x6 pixels. It's at fucking 120p. There's not enough room on the screen for implications. So here's where the fun really starts. On the 16th of April 2015, this like non-Wikipedia user just identified by an IP address made some changes to the article. Some little grammar corrections, removing things that were unnecessary, and adding Isaac Marshall as the voice actor from 1996 to 2001. For the record, Isaac Marshall was a Nintendo of America software engineer in the 90s who also voiced Toad in the N64 games, replacing the bit that says that Bowser was voiced by stock sound effects in the 90s, which he absolutely was. That's a goddamn cheetah sound. And using giantbomb.com as a source, user Vadi the Wind Demon undid a bunch of these changes. Over a week later, on April the 29th, our IP friend tried to remake these changes, and then Vadi the Wind Demon undid them. IP made about 5 million more changes. Vadi undoes it again. The absolute scoundrel he is. So that's when this debate starts. How is it that Wikipedia keeps taking out the section on Isaac Marshall every time I try to put it back in? I have cited my sources. They are legitimate. What's that line from King Lear? The man was, at least for a time, legitimately the voice of Bowser, and I have proof that he was. Stop calling those roars, snarls, and laughs stock sound effects. They are the voice of a real person. Stop trying to delete it, Wikipedia. Don't believe me? Use Google for crying out loud. Also, it's spelled Dino Hatton with 2 A's, not Dino Hatten. Stop trying to correct me there too. Just accept my edits already, will you? Those are stock sound effects, not voice acting. Also, Giant Bomb is not a reliable source as anyone can edit it, and it does not cite it at all. Also, Bowser's voice was the same in the Japanese version of Mario Kart 64, when Isaac had no participation or credit in that regional version. Then why is Isaac Marshall featured in hundreds of Mario reference sites? Prove to me that they are not stock sound effects, and cite your sources. This person's playing hot potato with the burden of proof. It is not Isaac's voice. I already did prove it to you. Nothing official says he did them. You have again failed to cite your sources. This is getting to be ridiculous. If you really think he wasn't Bowser, why don't you go ask him yourself? And you have failed to cite reliable sources, as if non-traditional sources are worse than no sources at all. Ridiculous. I love that attitude. Like, at that point you might as well start using like your horoscope or a tarot reading as a Wikipedia source. You know what? Screw this. I'm gonna find the guy and ask him myself. It's the best way. Also, you misspelled site. Ooh, whoa, tough guy. Obsessed with the idea of Isaac Marshall making a modulated cheetah noise with his mouth. You obviously have a bad attitude. And then a YouTube link. Oh, it's just a video of the Mario 64 end credits? Okay, cool. Like I'd trust a YouTube video any more than you would trust Giant Bomb. Just because a voice actor isn't in the credits doesn't mean he's not there. Some voice actors go uncredited. I mean, okay, IP makes a good point here just because, like, it's Nintendo we're talking about. And if they can get out of having to credit or pay someone ever, they will do it. Anyway, since YouTube videos are now apparently legitimate sources, watch this video. Oh my god, this is really good. So, the link led to a Did You Know voice acting video about Nintendo characters, and it does show Isaac Marshall next to Toad, who is above Bowser. God, this is beautiful. That wasn't Bowser Isaac's picture was cited on, it was Toad's. Then you failed to recognize the point I was emphasizing. YouTube videos are not the most reliable source out there. This person's literally trying to use Giant Bomb as a source. Like, if your house was any glassier, you'd be growing Audrey in it. Laugh at me all you want. Can stock sound effects do this? And who changed it back to Dino Hatten again? It's Dino Hatton, not Dino Hatten. You know, there really is something kind of interesting about writing in all caps to convey just how angry and upset you are. Like, there's something about the way you have to, like, sit there and deliberately type all caps that just demonstrates how performative it is. It's like the person who, like, forces themselves to start shaking just so you know how upset they are. Do the people at this site know nothing about video games? Facepalm. Yes, stock sound effects can do that. There's a thing called sound editing, you know, which I'm actually skilled at and know a lot about. Oh, of course you are. Sigh. Forget it. Wikipedia has never been regarded by most academics as a reliable source for information anyway. Why should I fight with people who are never 100% accurate? God, all this like dramatic talking is killing my throat. I provided enough logic for you. Whether you like it or not, that's on you. Also, Mario Party 1, Super Mario Sunshine, and Luigi's Mansion uses those Bowser roars, and again, no credit of Isaac Marshall at all. Also, the link you provided also said he was in Mario Golf Toadstool Tour and Mario Superstar Baseball, 2 games he also had nothing to do with. You know that saying I want to give up doesn't mean I want you to reply, right? You just won't give up until you have the final word, will you? This is so embarrassing. This person's talking like an edgy, like, Lifetime movie character. Alright, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Just because a person is not in some stupid credits does not mean he wasn't there. Bombarding me with a gazillion game titles where those Godzilla-like roars are heard isn't going to prove your point there. God, those Godzilla-like roars. This is like embarrassing prose. This is like on like the Zelda wiki where they incessantly refer to Link as the young hero over and over again. In addition, your bragging to me about being a sound editor does not cover the fact that you spelled your incorrectly. Oh shit, shots fired. God, they really said that like they were doing something. Not to mention that this article does not deserve to be locked because it is chock full of spelling, grammar, and formatting mistakes. 1. It's Dino Hatton. 2. Not Dino Hatten. Don't tell me you spell Manhattan as Manhattan. 2. 4. Which are wildly redundant more accurate about Bowser in the live action 5. There are too many Bowser. This article is so problematic that the fact somebody would have the nerve to lock it is just a crying shame. An absolute crying shame. God, this is so painful. Like, stop trying to be a period piece, you fucking like turn of the century industrialist. A crying shame. Please, please don't do this. It is very clear to me now that the people at Wikipedia are conceited, greedy bullies who think they know everything just because they're the internet's #1 most popular encyclopedia. Well, guess what? You're not all that or a bag of chips. What the hell does that mean? Is that a thing anyone has ever said? You're not all that or a bag of chips. Academics discredit everything that comes off of your entitled little keyboards, even if you do cite your sources. I love this like high and mighty, like insulting of Wikipedia. All this posturing as if your core motivation here is anything other than like desperation to have your contributions to Wikipedia acknowledged. I swear that anybody who's employed by or has an account at Wikipedia has a literal god complex because you think you have the power to control every piece of information in the world at no charge. God, yeah, everybody at Wikipedia has a god complex. Not the guy that's giving a whole ass Light Yagami speech. I'm done with this site. I'm going to give up on this cause. The idea of an encyclopedia that everybody and their Aunt Frances can edit is a fundamentally ridiculous concept sucked anyway. It's full of spelling, grammar, and formatting mistakes out the wazoo. You think this is some sort of competition? It's not. Grow up and quit being so competitive. We're here to have a consensus, not a battle royal, so quit being so picky. Also, I don't give a rat's behind about the Dino Hatton part. It's just a spelling error, which can be fixed afterwards. Also, I wasn't bragging. Bragging is when you compare other traits to yourself, like you ripping on me for a few spelling mistakes, like you're the grammar police or something. If it's a simple spelling mistake, then why hasn't anyone fixed it? Still, after weeks. This article is so poorly managed, it's an insult to my intelligence. Is English even the native language of whoever wrote such a poorly managed article? Wow, it was only a matter of time before the bald-faced xenophobia jumped out, huh? He wasn't credited because he did not do them. That's a complete load of poppycock. Poppycock? Poppycock? In 2015 we're using the word poppycock, huh? Shut up. He did too do them, you entitled illiterate. Why do you think there are so many sites out there that cite Marshall as Bowser's voice? Sure, maybe they were modified by special effects, and that sounds realistic, but the voices of a lot of characters in the annals of video game history have been given a similar treatment. Listen, I'm mad because some ungrateful, entitled a-hole who may or may not have been you had a nasty habit of reverting my spelling and grammar edits every time I fixed them out of civil courtesy. You know what? Everything I think is wrong and everything you think is right. There are no websites that cite Marshall as Bowser, and they are all figments of my imagination, and Google search has lied to me. End of discussion. All this intellectual high and mightiness for someone that's treating Google searches as an academic resource. Somebody else jumps in on this IP, please present every source you have that proves your point. I don't want to argue with you, I just want to see your sources. Gamehiker.com, AbsoluteVideogames.com, Smash Wiki's list of voice actors, Discogs page, GameWise.co, an IMDb list of Isaac Marshall roles? You can't go wrong with IMDb. Can 1,164 voters be wrong? Hard to say. You know, that's actually pretty cool. I have an army of 1,164 voters backing me. That's so funny because that's such an infinitesimal portion of the population. You think 1,000 votes is gonna win you an election? Say, Sergey? Sarge? Since you're here, could you please address those spelling mistakes if it's not too much to ask? Websites where anyone can write are unusable on Wikipedia. I believe this discounts a majority of the sources so far. As far as spelling errors go, you'll have to explain what you're referring to. What about IMDb? You know, that's funny, because you are literally Wikipedia, and you're saying that websites where anyone can write are unusable on a site where anyone can write? That's like calling yourself unreliable, which is what every university says you are. Ironic, isn't it? Okay, Palpatine. It's not ironic at all. Wikipedia is based entirely on what can be verified by reliable sources. As such, using a source that could be altered at any point by any person directly contradicts that. If we allowed for that, people could manipulate the wikis to say anything they want, and then in turn write whatever they want on Wikipedia, and then literally linking to a Wikipedia page about citing IMDb. Okay, alright, this is where we get to the juicy bit. The fact that you completely ignore my requests for corrections to this very day just goes to show how ignorant you all are. Don't flatter yourself, petty non-academic. I've seen you cite the Mushroom Kingdom. That site is many things, but I assure you that a reliable source isn't one of them. You think you're the greatest source for free information in the modern world? Ha! Your site's existence is dependent on the gullibility of modern society, who will believe whatever you preach. Your site is for lazy people too lazy to do their homework, and use your pathetic waste of a site as a crutch for easy information full of factual flaws that anyone can bend and twist at any time. The amount of contempt I have for you would blow your mind if you could see it on my face. You think you're the hero in this story? You're not. You have done more harm than good to the way people do their research. In fact, you should know what a horrible site you work for, Mr. Sarge. I posted this links because I thought you should know for whom it is you work. You know what? There's only one way to resolve this once and for all, and you and I know perfectly well what that is. 1. Find Isaac Marshall. 2. Speak to him. I am genuinely shocked that I was able to do that in one take. Like, this is so painful. Like, there is some kind of hero complex here. It's too much. Like, I wonder where this person is now. Do you have a better source or not? If yes, present it. If not, we're done here. Any more personal attacks, like calling people ignorant, will likely lead to you getting a block as well, so please tone it down. Somebody else got a block? Who? Listen, I don't want to get angry, nor do I want to launch an attack on any one specific person, but I am angry because lack of anyone's responsiveness in general to my requests for spelling, grammar, and factual fixes does not leave me with a good impression of your site. Anyway, like I just said, there is only one completely reliable source, and that source is Marshall himself. All I have to do is know how to contact him. This is so not true. We're circling back to my uncle who works at Nintendo here. Oh, and one of your other versions of this site cites Marshall as Bowser. Thought you ought to know that your other languages just need some updates. I was just trying to solve the core issue here first, which is the sourcing. It seems you have none, so until you do, it's to stay off the article. And no one else got blocked. The as well was in reference to your editing restrictions. You've already been restricted from editing this article due to this content dispute. Any more personal attacks and you'll lose the ability to edit any articles for a period. Recording this has been taking way longer than I expected. I should have gone to bed like an hour ago. I'm gonna have to come back to this shit tomorrow. Hi gamers, it's tomorrow, and I'm back at this shit. You know, I think this is a good time for a bit of an interlude. What is it that makes a Bowser voice great? You have the gruff Cookie Monster voice of Mario Sunshine, the animalistic nightmare noises of Smash, the modular cheetah noise that may or may not be Isaac Marshall. I think it doesn't get better than the Mario Party 8 era voice clips. What I love is that in that game, he just says complete gibberish, but he says it so confidently. He enunciates it, and he says all of it like he is just going off. So like last night when I quit, I did not realize just how close I was to the end of this. I could not keep myself awake any longer though. As you might remember from what was for me a day ago, but for you will be like maybe a minute ago, I will try to tone it down, but you should know they're not intended as not personal attacks against any specific individuals. Whoa, looks like you need to be proofread. They're intended as general criticisms of your site's management. Whether you take it personally is a decision entirely up to you. What if I had legitimate sourcing? Would I then be free to edit this article again? Also, you don't cite any sources to prove that Bowser's voice was provided by stock sound effects either. The pot here is apparently calling the kettle black. This person's like periodic use of like bold text is just like so embarrassing. It's like, you think you're going off, don't you? Like, you're not going off though. Bowser went off when he said dololblioblala. Isaac Marshall went off when he made that Cheeto noise. You are not going off. That said, how about we call it a truce and go with the following instead? First, we delete the whole sentence before the last. Then we start to voice over like this. Bowser's first creative voice in video games was provided by radio personality and voice actor software, and then we continue the rest as usual. No mention of either Marshall or stock sound effects whatsoever. Sound fair to you? Really, man, I hope we can settle on this agreement. I know this sounds crazy, but this article has been a home to me for the past several years. I've really enjoyed coming here and editing it every time it makes a small goof, because I love making things easier for passersby in cyberspace to read and sharing my knowledge with them. For someone whose head is such a fucking hot air balloon, this person really seems to manage to trip over the doorstep every time they're composing what should be a simple sentence. I really do hope you understand where I'm coming from here. I'm a long-time anonymous contributor to this article, and it holds a special place in my heart. The way this person's just spinning around and like trying to play the pathos angle, like trying to make this like literally the only thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is grandma's fresh-baked Wikipedia typos that I would correct. It holds a special place in my heart. In fact, the same goes for every article I've edited here in which I have extensive knowledge on the subject. Okay, I am kind of curious as to whether that's actually true or not. Whether they actually have been, like, editing this article for years, whether it's their comfort article or whatever. There's not really any way to verify it because they do their edits signed out, but looking in the history, that IP address hadn't edited the Bowser article before this incident. Anyway, let's get back to the point. The truth is, I don't hate your site. While I do have contempt for some things you do, I know that, all in all, you have a good purpose for doing what you do. Bruh, how'd you manage to say do 4 times in one sentence? The article was only locked for 24 hours, though I'll lock it right back up in an instant if disputes happen again, or if you add anything that's improperly / not sourced. Anything that cannot be sourced, should be removed. If Vadi or anyone cannot provide sources for the current content of the article, it should be removed too. You're free to present proposals on the talk page, but you need to write them according to what sources say. I'm not trying to present any new information. I'm just proposing that we take out something that's already there, something not cited. It's unlocked again? Okay, if I can't put in anything about Isaac Marshall, could I please at least make the spelling fixes I said I was going to make, if only with your consent? And that's sort of when this story falls off. A few hours later, Vadi makes a comeback with some YouTube links, alleging that the Bowser Roar audio was from a King Kong movie. That same day, the day after Walpurgisnacht 2015, Vadi the Wind Demon corrected the spelling of Dino Hatton. And then Wikipedia user Smuckola undid it, and then they undid it, saying, "Sorry, typo. My thank button is right next to my revert button." Vadi made another edit, removing the words "provided mainly by stock sound effects." Our IP friend kept editing up until 2016. What do you think happened after that point? Did they just drift away from Wikipedia? Did they get a new computer with a new IP address? Or did they die? Or maybe all of the above? Vadi the Wind Demon is still editing pages to this day, and so is Sarge Cross. The Bowser page looks better than ever. Apparently, Bowser has received a mostly positive reception, with several critics noting that he's one of the most iconic and recognizable video game villains ever. Isaac Marshall is not listed as a voice actor. According to IMDb, Isaac Marshall really did voice Toad in Mario Kart 64, and he had a few other roles thereafter. Ship's steward in Titanic, audience member in Kiss of a Stranger, minor role uncredited in C Spot Run. His career seems to cut off in 2001. Hopefully he's out on his own space odyssey now. I've also found a page for Isaac Marshall on Wikibin, which, I don't know what that is. This page alleges that he voiced Bowser in multiple games. The homepage for Wikibin is, Welcome to Wikibin, the recycle bin of Wikipedia. Freedom of speech is the concept of being able to speak freely without censorship. Nevertheless, compliance with this principle is often lacking. Oh my god. So, I'm just taking a glance at this, but what it seems like is, this is the place for submitting things that got rejected from Wikipedia on the basis of free speech. When the website that purports to be an encyclopedia rejects things that are not true, it's literally saying that you should not have free expression. This is what George Orwell warned us about. That, soldier protecting people meme, but it's Wikibin protecting the internet from fact-checking. Anyway, I once again find myself in a position where there is no substantial conclusion I can provide. This is just one of those videos that are yeah, I think this thing is funny. It's just a really annoying and pretentious Bowser debate. Hey again, I'm now up to the 3rd recording session for this video. So originally I intended to end the video on a quiet note without doing any scripted commentary, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt there was still something that needed to be said. Why did this whole dispute happen? This petty dispute about a minute detail packed with personal attacks and self-righteousness and an embarrassing YA protagonist speech? How many times have disputes like this happened? How many times will they happen again? It would be easy to assume that the IP person was trolling, but they come across as a little too earnest. In my experience, troll arguments generally have a sort of smug smirk beneath them, as if to say, "Go on, engage me, I dare you." I don't see any of that in IP, especially since they started backpedaling once they feared consequences. I've witnessed disputes like these a lot of times over the years. I alluded several times to my experience with niche discourse in the writing tips video. I joked about it then, but the fact is, you don't have to dig for long to see an earnest post that's like, I can't believe some people seriously think it's morally acceptable to watch this cartoon. The Isaac Marshall-Bowser fight perfectly encapsulates every aspect of the archetypal internet argument. Person 1 believes a statement, they assert that this statement is true. When person 2 disagrees, one responds with acrimony. When asked for proof, one presents quote-unquote evidence that is loose and unverifiable. They then proceed as though they have already proven their point. When 2 states that they don't accept this evidence, 1 frames 2 as a bad faith actor, whether that's true or not. I believe that in this case there are 3 factors which to varying degrees have some stake in a large portion of online debates. The first is also the simplest: anonymity. If I'm in a mask, I don't have to feel accountable. If I'm fighting someone in a mask, I can picture any face I want for them. Our IP friend didn't even have a username. They acted in what they perceived to be a zero-consequence environment with nothing to hold them back. They don't need to operate on any pretense of good faith or compassion. The second factor relates to a salubrious article that popped into my head at the end of the second recording session. The 5 Geek Social Fallacies by Michael Sullivan Wilson, published on his own blog in 2007. You might have heard of this one, it's pretty widespread. The article describes 5 misconceptions about social interaction that are common in, but not exclusive to, nerdy circles. I first encountered this piece as a teen and it resonated with me. If you haven't read it, I can't recommend it strongly enough. It really did lead me to reevaluate some of the friendships I had at the time and even to take a closer look at some of my own behaviors. The first fallacy is ostracizers are evil. Sullivan Wilson postulates both in this point and throughout the article that many nerds, likely due to formative experiences with ostracism, vilify exclusion in all forms to the point that they struggle even to say leave me alone to a person that's harassing them. And the flip side of that phenomenon is being unable to handle it when something is going on without you. Let me just wildly speculate about how I think this went down. The IP editor comes to a page on Wikipedia and thinks, this could use some changes. They make some changes, make some corrections, and one of those changes is an unsubstantiated claim. Vadi sees the unsubstantiated claim and undoes all of IP's changes as a result. Now, IP can't interpret this as the rules of credibility being enforced, albeit with a broad brush. They can only see it as, I tried to do something and I was prevented. They think, why is everyone else allowed to edit this article but not me? They're all ganging up on me. As a result, IP immediately constructs a mental planisphere of the hierarchy here. I am a victim, everyone else is a clique, and they're leveraging their authority in a coordinated attack on me. And victimhood imparts virtue, so the attackers are automatically wrong about everything. I recognize that that's speculation, and it's an extremely specific speculation that I can't prove any more than I could prove Isaac Marshall voiced Bowser, but I feel that I am equipped to recognize this thought process, both from having fought to unlearn it in myself and from having observed it in others. I'm not claiming to be capable of psychoanalyzing anyone, I'm just approaching it with my own rationale. And I suspect that my speculation is at least partly correct. IP's behavior demonstrates a feeling of rejection, a feeling that their intelligence has been insulted. If I wanted to be really uncharitable, I'd say that they seem to be having a Randian crisis, like, the truly great people are being held back by the mindless masses. But that is, like I said, uncharitable. Anyway, IP was clearly trying to establish dominance. With epithets like petty non-academic, they assert both their own status as academic and the intellectual inferiority of their so-called opponent. And if they're a superior academic, how can their input not be worthwhile? Of course, if IP is actually an academic, don't you think they'd know about peer reviewing or the editorial process? But they don't seem to be thinking about this as academia. They speak about it like it's a party they're not invited to. IP is Rudolph and this is a reindeer game. The standard process of argument formulation and defense is shrugged off in favor of, well, the polite thing to do would be to just accept my input. Rejecting people is evil. Rejecting ideas is evil. All potential content for this article should be acceptable. Veracity be damned. You push this idea to the logical extreme and you end up with Wikibin. If you try to tell me that your platform will not host my claims because you don't feel I've adequately proven them, you are literally attacking my free speech. And to think about Wikipedia that way is to characterize it as a site where just anyone can come and contribute anything for funsies, a playground where all the kids meet up to play pretend. If Wikipedia were like that, if it were to allow anyone to just write about their pet obsession ad nauseum, well, it would have an even harder time being regarded as academically rigorous. And all of this leads into the third factor I posit, which is a deceptively simple one. Nobody wants to be wrong. From IP's perspective, this is about more than defending a particular argument, it's about not having to be the wrong one in the exchange. The harder they argue their case, the deeper they sink their cost, the more they feel they stand to lose if they accept defeat. We use the phrase admit you're wrong or admit you were wrong often, but that admission runs deeper. You're really admitting that you have been wrong. Every paragraph you wrote in defense of your argument was effort wasted. Every minute you spent fighting for it was a minute wasted. And that is the difficult part. And this can manifest a lot of different ways. Have you ever had a disagreement with someone where you presented a point that they simply could not dispute, and you could just see their gears snag for a second? You see a change in their facial expression or a tangle in their words because they really can't contest it? And in the end, they just shake it off, say, let's agree to disagree, as if to say, I believe what I believe and I can't change that now. An extreme example is illustrated in the 1954 case study When Prophecy Fails, which examines the way those who believe in doomsday prophecies react when their prophecies inevitably fail to come true. The study posits that cost sunk correlates with fervor. The person holding the belief must have committed himself to it. For the sake of his belief, he must have taken some important action that is difficult to undo. The more difficult such actions are to undo, the greater the commitment to the belief. Though this is in discussion of extreme fringe beliefs, its applicability to everyday scenarios is remarkable. When you combine the fear of having wasted your sunk cost with the much simpler fear of losing the argument, you end up with something volatile. But why is it that this mental process distilled in relation to end times prognostication also seems so readily perceptible in a silly web argument about a big turtle man? The sunk cost for a doomsday believer might be giving up all your possessions, quitting your job, cutting people off. IP's situation was ultimately meaningless, but something about the idea of losing seems to have felt cataclysmic for them. And look at the actions they took. They used manipulative and offensive arguments. As comical and ridiculous as some of their word choices were, the things they said really were rude. Depending on your perspective, they might range from disrespectful to bordering on verbal abuse. They shifted the burden of proof, they created straw men, they deployed Mott and Bailey. It quickly stops being about Isaac Marshall or Bowser Koopa or Koopa Bowser, and it becomes about me versus you. Through the language of your website, IP carved a party line, characterized all of their opponents as a unified authority synonymous with Wikipedia itself, while characterizing themselves as the innocent everyman simply trying to have a good time. They separate themselves from Wikipedia, try to disparage it, even as they attempt to participate in it. Talk about having your cake. It's your site, your pathetic, non-academic site that no one respects. Pay no heed to the fact that what I'm really doing is begging you to let me participate in your site. It's like a kid saying, well, I didn't want to go to your stupid party anyway. And none of these tactics worked. None of them succeeded at anything other than making IP look like a pretentious brat. And that's because both Vadi and Sarge stuck to their guns, maintained that integrity was the most important thing for the article, which is frankly commendable, as ridiculous as this journey was. Good on you, Vadi. You deserve to be in one of the best Zelda games. I'm not talking about the Minish Cap. At the end of it all, when it is so far beyond clear that IP can't have it their way, they say, let's meet in the middle, as if coming to a compromise is more important than challenging falsehoods. The best content for this article isn't what's factually accurate, but what makes everyone happy. Let's just agree to disagree. It's very, very common to fall back on something like this when you realize your beliefs are indefensible. The whole discussion is funny, it's amusing, it's silly, it's an exercise in secondhand embarrassment, but it's also a case study in the rejection of reality. The party lines mentality of fighting for arguments that just aren't true for no other reason than that that's the camp you pitched your tent in. I hope the takeaway from this is evident. My advice is, if you find yourself in a debate, take a minute, take a breath, consider what you actually believe, consider whether the other person is saying something of merit, consider whether you're disagreeing with the other person because you actually disagree or because you're supposed to disagree. It is possible to do all of this introspection and still come out of it believing that you're right. I mean, I've already implied that I thought Vadi was mostly right from the start, but it's important to make sure that you are using your critical faculties to come to these conclusions and not just presupposing your beliefs. I'm of the opinion that if you believe anything, you should be able to explain why in a way that goes beyond it is because it is. Even saying murder is bad, you should be able to put into words why murder is bad for a reason deeper than, well, it's obvious. And I'm not saying that you should be forced to explain it to those around you. I mean, you should be able to explain it to yourself, to actually understand the rationale behind your own beliefs. Your beliefs, ethics, and philosophies should be shaped by your rationalization of the observable world. It's not productive to squeeze the observable world into a prefabricated logic. I hope that this advice is salient, and I hope it resonates. Speaking for myself, I know I'll get a lot of mileage if during arguments in tense situations I stop and ask myself, do I sound like IP right now? So as it turns out, there actually is an epilogue to this whole story. IP made a comeback in November of 2016. I'm gonna recap this. For conciseness, I will keep most of my comments in a text form when I'm editing the video. The anonymous IP user returns under 2 separate IP addresses, which are both distinct from the original one, but they are so evidently the same person. So IP returns to the talk page for Bowser, and they delete the entire section that was discussing the voice. A mod called meters shows up and reverts IP's changes. On the user talk page for IP's new IP address, meters posts a standard warning prompting IP to respond, "Excuse me, but I'm trying to save my reputation by erasing a past argument I had. This is not vandalism. This is for my own good. That argument about voiceover portrayal resulted in nothing good. Leave the talk page alone. The talk page history does not get deleted." IP then shows up on Meters' talk page. "I wish to be forgotten. May I please erase the voiceover portrayal argument in the Bowser talk section? Nothing good came from that argument and I want it to be forgotten." No. Already answered on your talk page. I figured. You Wikipedia users are stubborn as mules. Then Meters deletes the entire exchange on their own talk page. Back on IP's talk page, "What do you want from me? A birth certificate? I'm using an office IP, not my home one. Do you even care about others' reputations besides your own sites? Stay off my talk. Nobody knows who you are, and I doubt very much that anyone cares. You stay off my talk. This is personal business. I am not vandalizing Wikipedia. I am simply here to protect my reputation in case a real cyber spy finds me via my IP address and uses it to defame my reputation. Okay, fine. Can I archive the discussion instead to hide it from immediate public view? If I can, then how can I? Then they completely wipe the page. If you inadvertently made edits using an IP address that can be associated with a named account, then you can ask an admin to revdel the IP sigs. Personally, at this point, I think you should just drop it. Are you saying that if I create a named account from my home IP, I can ask an admin to remove the IP addresses from the comments and protect my reputation? I can't live with myself because of what I did out of anger back in April to May 2015. Then IP wipes the whole page again. Why do you keep asking me questions and then blanking the page? If you don't want me to reply, then don't ask me a question. If you do want me to reply, don't blank the question. And no, I'm not saying you can create a named account and then ask to have your IP sig from 18 months ago dev-delled. Okay, fine. So I'm just gonna create a named account when I get home. Then after I make edits, I'll use my home IP to ask for dev-delling. And I do get nervous when people take time to reply. Then they wipe the page again. Then they unwipe it. No, read what I wrote above. Don't do that. It will not work. I don't know how I can be any clearer than blah blah blah. Just leave it alone. Nobody cares about those edits. Oh, but someone will. I won't say who it is for that person's safety, but someone I know will. This person has made it a point to watch everything I do, so I live in near constant fear of being discovered should the person happen to stumble on this article one day, even if the person doesn't care at all about video games, which may decrease the risk of discovery by default. Maybe this will help you understand my reasons for attempted content deletion a little more. I hope. Then they wiped the page again. Then they unwiped it. I don't get it. You can erase my comment to you, but I can't erase your comments to me? There went free speech down the drain. Then they deleted the "I don't know how I can be any clearer than" bit of Meters' comment with the description, "got rid of an abusive statement." Why do I always pick battles I can't win? You're obviously trolling. I'm done with you. You're on your final warning. Why do I always pick battles I can't win was supposed to be the last sentence of this discussion, so goodbye. Then they retcon this comment. Why do I always pick battles I can't win isn't trolling. So to put it another way, goodbye. I've had it with this site. Ciao for now. Now, the real star of this epilogue is what happens at the very end of it. Over on IP's original talk page, that is the talk page for the IP address that they actually were using during the whole Bowser debacle, they have had, since April 2015, the automated message flagging their activities on the Bowser page as an edit war. And on this day, in November of 2016, they go to that section and they change the title of it from April 2015 to Cruel and Unusual Punishment. 3 minutes later, they change the words, "This isn't done to punish an editor, but to prevent the disruption caused by edit warring," to "This is done to punish an editor who stands up for truth, right, and good." There's also an automated message on the page about how they were making talk page comments unsigned. IP changes to allow other editors to easily see who wrote what and when, to allow other editors to violate your natural God-given right to privacy. 1 minute later, they change, "Please be sure to sign your posts," to "Please be sure to compromise your privacy." Back in the edit war section, Cruel and Unusual Punishment, they change edit warring is usually seen as obstructing the normal editing process to "This is usually seen as exercising free speech." And they also change, instead of edit warring, "Please discuss the situation with the editors involved and try to reach a consensus," to instead of edit warring, "Please don't bother discussing the situation with the editors involved because they will move heaven and earth to tell you everything you think is wrong on the Bowser talk 2 minutes page." After that, they change, "You appear to be engaged in an edit war," to "You appear to be engaged in a heroic battle for truth and justice." They change, "Reverting another editor's contributions may seem necessary," to "is indeed necessary." They change, "Instead of edit warring," to "Instead of fighting for the right." And they change, "Violating the rules is likely to lead to a loss of editing privileges, thank you," to "Violating the rules will end your freedom. You stink." 1 minute later, they changed the signature of the person who flagged the edit war to say, "My name is Salvidrim, and I'm a piece of shit." But shit is censored. And here is the real kicker. 10 minutes later, they change "I'm a piece of shit" to "I'm an Isaac Marshall denier." And that says it all. Despite all of their performing on the talk pages about feeling shame or fear for their safety or whatever it is, at the very end of it, they still claim it's about Isaac Marshall. And that person did not have anything to do with the whole Bowser thing, except for flagging that it was an edit war. But for IP, it's all about the party line. Anyway, the real kicker is, 5 minutes later, Meters reverts all of those changes.